What can we do? A lot of us are overwhelmed, pissed, and scared. I don't want to wait till the next election. I don't want to just write my congressperson and hope that they'll do the right thing. I don't want to just post things to the vacuum of social media. I don't want to just make statements about things. I want to change how things are. There are a zillion things we can do, and people are coming up with new ones all the time. This video is going to focus on mutual aid projects, what they are, and why we should be developing them right now. Mutual aid projects are a form of political participation in which people take responsibility for caring for one another and changing political conditions, not just through symbolic acts or putting pressure on their representatives in government, but by actually building new social relations that are more survivable. During recent flooding and storms, we saw mutual aid in action as people helped each other survive. Mutual aid isn't just for those big weather disasters, it is also for the daily, routine, life-threatening disasters of capitalism and white supremacy. People who are pissed about police and prisons are doing mutual aid work like creating prison letter writing projects, where people get connected to pen pals in prison to build relationships, help prepare for release, help prisoners have advocates on the outside, and help build a movement against policing in prisons that is informed and led by the people who know the very most about how the system actually works. Some people are creating jail support programs where people get together to make a schedule and agree to be outside their local jail on that schedule and greet anyone getting out and help them get what they need. Maybe a ride, clothes, a phone to call contacts, information about services or benefits. Some people are organizing community bail funds, revolving funds that can pay people's bail so that they are not locked up while they try to prepare for their defense. Money bail systems are one of the ways that poor people and people of color are given the worst chances in the criminal system. Court support projects are where people coordinate to accompany someone facing charges to their court dates, ideally by packing the court with supporters each time, so that no one has to go alone, and sometimes to influence lawyers, judges, and jury by showing their support for the criminalized person. Some people are coordinating ride systems to help families visit prisoners who are being held in facilities far from home. In Oakland, the Oakland Power Projects are about strengthening people's skills to respond to community emergencies in ways that minimize police contact. When you call 911 for a health emergency, the cops come too, and that often leads to violence. The Oakland Power Projects is about training the community to respond to health emergencies, including mental health crises, chronic health problems, and acute health emergencies, so that people don't have to call 911. People who are scared about the emboldenment of ICE and Border Patrol and increasing deportations are doing things like forming rapid response networks where people warn each other about immigration raids and help each other hide, and helping immigrants do safety planning in case they get detained so that someone is ready to take care of their kids and elders. Some rapid response projects are even working on training people to show up and physically stop ICE from taking someone away. Imagine if we built that kind of power to stop arrests through rapid mobilization of a lot of people to outnumber cops. No More Deaths, an organization in Arizona, works to save the lives of people crossing the border by putting food, water, and supplies in the harsh desert areas where people who are crossing often die from the conditions. There are so many mutual aid project possibilities because there are so many intense ways people aren't having their needs met in the brutal systems we live under. Like food projects like Food Not Bombs, projects where people organize temporary housing for people coming out of prison or foster care by opening their homes to each other, childcare collectives where people watch each other's kids so they can go to political meetings, court, or jobs, projects where people accompany vulnerable people like trans people or people with disabilities to medical appointments or public benefits offices and hearings, projects where people make sure neighbors being pushed out by gentrification have good access to information about their housing rights and accompany each other to housing court, help people read documents and defend themselves from eviction, projects where people protest landlords who are refusing to make repairs or give back security deposits by directly protesting at those landlords' houses and businesses. The messages of this work are, the government is fucked, we can't rely on it. You are not alone. The system is the problem, not the person being targeted by it. And we're going to take matters into our own hands and help each other survive right now, rather than expecting help from the same systems that have a clear history of causing harm. Mutual aid projects don't just help with the current disasters, they help us prepare for the ongoing disasters that are emerging because of climate chaos and crumbling infrastructure. When we build cooperative projects, practice making decisions together, share things, meet more people in our communities and learn about each other's skills and needs, and learn how current systems work and how they are not working, we're better prepared for the next storm, the next blackout, and the next budget cuts. Something really important about all this is that mutual aid is not charity. Charity is where rich people and institutions give tiny crumbs to poor people to make themselves look better. Usually there are a lot of strings attached to what they give, like giving only to mothers, or only to children, only to sober people, or only to people of faith. Charity rides on the idea that rich people or social workers should decide who is a deserving poor and who is the undeserving poor, and that rich people can put conditions on the housing or food or cash they give poor people. Charity blames poor people for poverty. Mutual aid blames the system for making people poor and says everyone deserves everything they need. Charity affirms the existing distribution of wealth and life chances. Mutual aid challenges it. Charity is top-down, mutual aid is horizontal. Charity is about control, hierarchy, and isolation. Mutual aid is about solidarity, liberation, and participation. People are scared and angry right now and trying to find ways to fight back and support each other. Building mutual aid projects is a way to plug people in, build shared understandings of current conditions, offer meaningful support to vulnerable people, and prepare for the coming disasters. Mutual aid work is not easy. It means forming lasting commitments to doing hard work, collaborating with people even when we have conflict, and facing the heart-wrenching realities of the systems we live under. It is also deeply satisfying work that transforms us from being exasperated, passive observers of the shitstorm we're living in to inspired builders of the new world we desperately crave and need. Stop believing in authority and start believing in each other. We're all we've got. We're all we need.
It is hard to walk down the street these days without running into a billionaire who says they're changing the world. Right? Mark Zuckerberg is changing the world. Jeff Bezos is transforming people through charity. The Google people are organizing all the world's information and trying to do this and that. Elon Musk is going to space, which actually would be great for everybody. And you really have more money being given away than's ever been given away. Social, everything, social venture, social enterprise, social this, impact that. Every young person, I go to campuses where I spend a lot of time, every young person on these elite campuses, they don't say they want to be bankers anymore. It's not the 80s. They say, you know, I just want to go to Africa, just want to help the Africans. They've never been to Africa. And the Africans are getting tired of actually all these people coming there to help them and just collecting bracelets. But there is this tendency among the rich and powerful to want to make change and actually do these real activities. And to be clear, some of that activity is really good and does help and save lives. Some of it's more marketing. But the uncomfortable fact is that when you actually look at any of the data, these people claim to love data, the data is that the very same people who are giving and doing philanthropy and doing social this and impact that are actually also the great hoarders of opportunity in our time. Right? Their share of the world's wealth increases, not decreases, every year. They're grabbing more of the pie every year, even as they help. Their share of the nation's income has doubled since the middle of the 20th century. The 1% has. And you know all the things you've covered in the show. Half of this country, the bottom half of this country has not basically seen a pay rise since 1979. You've had a tremendous age of innovation that has failed to translate into progress, if progress means most people's lives getting better. And the unmistakable fact that I learned through my reporting, I started the reporting with a question. What's the relationship between the two halves of this paradox? On the one hand, you got all these generous rich people. On the other hand, you have the fact that it's an age of inequality, an age of anger. America feels rigged to people. The American dream is elusive. What's the relationship? Is it just that this charity, this philanthropy, this do-gooding is not working? It's not working fast enough? Or is it actually that this charity and philanthropy and elite do-gooding is part of how they maintain the system that allows them to keep taking all. And what I found through my reporting was that when these elites get involved in social change, what they do is they change change. They take leadership of change. They Columbus social change. They declare themselves now the people, the CEO of Change Inc. And they edit out, in their capacity as board members, trustees, leaders of organizations, donors to causes, they edit out forms of change they don't really like, and they encourage forms of change they believe in. So on any issue, you take the empowerment of women, you know what they don't like? Maternity leave. You know why? Because it's expensive. It costs money, right? For companies, for the taxpayer, particularly wealthy taxpayers. So what do they like? Lean in. You know why? Because lean in's free. All you got to do is tell women that patriarchy is actually a posture problem. If you just lean at a slightly different angle of recline, patriarchy gone. Well, that's very cheap. Rich people love lean in.
Wait, but explain that in terms of maternity leave.
Well, maternity leave, to do maternity leave as one example of a social policy that would actually help women would cost this society a lot of money, right? Employers would have to, if that was a right, either the society would have to pay for that or private companies would have to pay for that in ways they don't right now. That's a way of actually empowering women that we know from data in other countries. That would be good. It would do the job, but it'd be expensive for the winners of our age. So what the winners of our age do in their capacities as kind of change agents and thought leaders is they kind of tip the scale and say, you know, that maternity leave thing, we don't need to do that. Let's just do lean in. They encourage, they give platforms.
And lean in means?
Lean in means telling women to raise their hands more and be a little more assertive in meetings to fight patriarchy. Right? Which is, I don't know, like telling the slaves to be nicer. I mean, like the answer to systems of oppression is not to tell people to be more pleasing to their bosses. But this is the advice from, you know, a billionaire corporate feminist, Sheryl Sandberg, who, while she was telling women to lean in, was also selling women out so that they would live under Donald Trump because Facebook was so unwilling to deal with the cyber war issue and the abuse of privacy issue and Cambridge Analytica, et cetera. Most of the women I know would prefer to live in a democracy, first and foremost, and not live under Donald Trump. So Sheryl Sandberg was selling them her products, but she was selling them out in a much more fundamental way. But she's not the only example. If you look at the education issue, when the rich and powerful get involved in that issue, they love charter schools. Why? Because it's a way for them to put their name on something, get on the board, be involved, tell their friends at a cocktail party in the Hamptons, you know, I got 3 black kids into Yale. I feel it's the least I could do. And it doesn't require them to actually give up anything. Whereas if you really want to make progress on that issue, you'd have to end the manifest cruelty in this country of funding public schools according to zip code, according to how nice your house is. They don't want to do that. Why? One, they'd lose access to a good public school, which some of them may use and some don't. 2, a lot of their home values and the niceness of their neighborhoods is actually wrapped up in the access to better public schools than other people have. If you actually made rich people's public schools fall to the level of everybody else's, you know, people would lose $200,000, $1 million of home value in Greenwich and Marin and elsewhere, right? Just because now that house didn't come with this extraordinary perk of an extra special, super duper public school. So again, rich people don't want to work on that issue, but they're happy to work on charter schools. On basic finances, a lot of rich people who get involved in this kind of change making, they love apps. Let's have an app to help, workers with precarious income smooth their income. Or let's have an app, a fintech app to help women save more for the future. Win-win, easy, doesn't hurt them at all, right? You know what they don't like? How about an initiative to actually rat out the trillions of dollars hiding in tax havens around the world? How come you don't really have many of the big billionaires funding philanthropic efforts to expose the tax havens? It's a serious question. I mean, if they're really about making the world a better place, that seems like a pretty good cause. It's revealing that they're not interested in that cause. Why? Because the people who have the most to lose from change can't be placed in charge of reforming the status quo. But all of us have actually allowed that to happen. All of us have participated in a culture that actually does sort of see Mark Zuckerberg as a change agent, that actually does see Silicon Valley as change agents, that actually does sort of buy it when ExxonMobil tries to rebrand itself as the renewable company. And so we all need to wake up and stop believing the phony story that the people with the most to lose from change can lead change.
And layoffs sweep the country, leaving millions at risk. Mutual aid groups are forming to protect and provide for the vulnerable. Their aim, solidarity, not charity.
My name is Jay Espinosa. I'm from the Bronx, born and raised. I'm part of the North Bronx Collective. It formed about 3 weeks ago to do a mutual aid action in terms of emergency food delivery. The Bronx is considered one of the poorest areas in the city of New York and the United States, not counting Native American reservations. The Bronx has one of the highest rates of diabetes in the country, highest rates of asthma. These are diseases that put people more at risk of getting COVID-19.
We did go from a 2-income household to a 1-income household. I do have a small child in my home. Things have been getting more expensive, like nothing's on sale anymore. There are supermarkets that are just not honoring sales or just price gouging. The mutual aid is making a big difference. I feel like there's less insecurity about food, which is a big deal for us.
The government refuses to provide the resources like food, like universal health care, universal housing. We're put in a position where we have to come in and provide out of our own pockets the things that people need, and we don't have those resources like the government has. Cuídate. The problem is not just that the COVID-19 is killing people, it's that the government is allowing COVID-19 to kill people.
Mutual aid is a word for whenever we do direct survival work for each other, but we do it from a shared understanding the systems in place aren't going to help us, and we need to get together right now and help each other. The most probably famous examples of mutual aid that we all talk about in the US now are the 60s and 70s uprisings against white supremacy and colonialism, and the Black Panther Party's survival programs. It created the free breakfast and lunch programs in the school system. The Young Lords taking over Lincoln Hospital and doing their own drug treatment programs. There's lots of really prominent examples during like some of the big climate-induced weather disasters, like we see mutual aid at the moment of Hurricane Katrina. We see this with the fires in California, with the hurricane in Puerto Rico. And so mutual aid often gets a big visibility moment in those kinds of huge crises like the one we're having right now with the pandemic. That framework of mutual aid is politicized, and it's coming from the perspective of ending poverty, ending wealth, ending criminalization, and to stop these root causes that produce this kind of inequality. Moments like this crisis draw our attention to where it already should be, which is who is most vulnerable. Those people know the most about what these problems look like and do, and they have the best ideas for how to solve them.
Mi nombre es Mirna, soy de Puebla, México. Hoy precisamente hago 4 años en Nueva York después de reunificarme con mi familia, porque yo estuve deportada en el 2013 al 2016. Entonces, parte de las promesas que yo hice fue que yo quería servir a mi comunidad. Me he estado dando cuenta que en el vecindario, nuestro círculo de amistades ha estado enfermándose. Entonces ahora estoy auxiliándolas, llevándoles algún tipo de alimentos a las casas porque tienen a sus seres queridos en el hospital o no tienen trabajo. Con ese ánimo de que sientan que hay ayuda, hay apoyo.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm kind of tired.
Yeah. No, I feel you. Well, we can just jump right into it then. Welcome to the first episode of our new video series on mutual aid, hosted by me, Sonia from WFPC. Today I'm super excited to be sitting down and talking with Kamara Bashar, who is a local performance artist and actress, and they're also the founder of the Twin Cities Mutual Aid Fund to support Black, trans, Native, and Two-Spirit artists. were you kind of up to before COVID-19 started?
I was actually in this really amazing show that was written by Marcella Michelle. She's local, amazing Black trans woman artist, artistic director of 20% Theater Company, one of the directors of Lightning Rod, just fantastic person. And it was this beautiful, like, all trans cast with Yoni Tamang and Kat Purcell, also of Lightning Rod. And we were just working on this really experimental piece about, well, everybody has a different opinion about what it's about, but it was sort of the premise of it was Marcella had written this piece about her playing other people, and we were playing her playing other people. And we did a lot of really fun work in terms of like trans collective identity and who is us and who are we when we're together, who am I, you know, that type of fun, amazing, like deep rolling work. So that's what I was doing artistically, which is not really separate from the next thing I'm going to say, but it kind of is and it isn't. So I also started working with the Minneapolis Arts Commission. I was appointed to the Ward 8 seat, or one of the 3 Ward 8 seats, by Andrea Jenkins. And then I was also on the Transgender Equity Council, appointed to the War 4 seat by Philippe Cunningham. So I was doing some advisory board work for the city. None of what I'm about to say is reflective of the city of Minneapolis or any of the boards and commissions upon which I serve. I have to get used to saying that. You know, I'm on the Public Art Advisory Board, and I started learning things about that and what that means, and seeing really cool art projects come through the city, public art pieces. And I just love the Transgender Equity Council. Like, it's just it's like a good group of people to be working with. And I the things that we were getting ready to do, the things that we are kind of, some of us are still talking about in community we're just like amazing. It was just amazing. So before this, I was surrounded by trans people, which is a privilege and a blessing. And I do deeply miss it and grieve that loss.
Yeah. So then what led you to kind of start doing mutual aid work and starting up that fund?
All of this went down, and then all of my work stopped. All of my art work stopped. I couldn't go to rehearsal anymore, obviously, because we can't be within 6 feet of each other. Can't do advisory board and commission work with the city because they stopped that state of emergency. That's what that means. And even if that was still going, I wouldn't really have, I don't think, the mental capacity for it. Just because everything has changed so quickly over the last few weeks. It's very, very difficult to keep up with it. But sort of, I guess, why I started to do it was because I knew that all of my friends and family were going to suffer from this. Like, it's proven across the board, Black trans people and Native trans people especially experience significant hardship, like much more than a cis person would, because they don't necessarily always have the family resources. They definitely don't have the societal resources. And they're very visible, like, giveaways along a spectrum. And the spectrum is kind of a limited word of like invitation for attack by different people, you know? So I just knew that artists especially were going to be falling through the cracks because a lot of us have to show up physically for our work, whether we're on stage or we're working physically with an art in a studio space. So it just made sense to me. Mutual aid work, I didn't know anything. Honestly, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about solidarity versus charity. I didn't know. Someone actually, about a month before that, someone pegged me as an organizer, and I was like, what does that mean? I had no clue. And then a friend of mine who is also a non-binary person added my spouse and I into this mutual aid group, and we got on this call and everybody was talking about stuff, you know, that needed to be done, that they were witnessing. People were also processing out loud. Everything started happening really fast, but I just had this really clear vision of, I just knew funding-wise who was going to be falling through the cracks, because I've worked with nonprofits. I often say unfortunately, but actually this was to my advantage going into this whole thing. I know who they're not funding. I know who they're not funding and all of the justifications for why they can't fund them, fund us. who they're not paying attention to. And I know who government says they send her, but I also know that often they can't direct funds towards affinity groups. I mean, actually not often, all the time they can't direct funds. They can't be like, we're gonna give this money to Black people. So I was like, okay, I'm out in the wild. I can raise whatever money I want, however I want, because all these other mutual aid groups are popping up everywhere. So I was just like, all right, like, let's just pick I'm gonna go really specific with it, and no one can stop me because I'm not part of an org and I'm not part of the government. And then it happened. So when I like looked at the mutual aid landscape, there were all these like little one-shot funds of $50, $60. Maybe you could apply a couple times. But again, for a trans person who doesn't have like fundamental resources in society to begin with because of the way that we're valued and because of white supremacy and capitalism, that doesn't mean anything. $50, that's gone in a day. Like, that's been gone. That's gone before it even gets in my pocket, $50, especially for an artist. Again, like all this contract work or lack of contract work. I saw that there were some things you could apply to, but you had to prove that you had contracts. Some of us were in between contracts, or some of us didn't have contracts because you don't always have a contract. Like, you know, there was some of these qualifications, or it was too little money or whatever. I was like, no. So I was like, let's just give it, let's give legitimate money. We'll be specific. So it'll be like less people apply, like ultra specific. I mean, there's an ongoing genocide against Native people and Black people in this country. And when you get down to trans and when you get down to artists, it's like, wow.
And what has your experience been like the past couple of months, like operating the fund?
Very, very affirming, definitely. It means, I don't even know how, like, I can't even crystallize into words for you how much it means to me to be able to, in a crisis, reach out to all these artists or have them, you know, apply to the fund and just be like, yeah, actually, here's this money for you. It's $2,000. You can go do whatever you want with it, you know? And then just say to a bunch of people with way more resources than I have or they have, give us the money because it's been due. It's overdue at this point. And we're not going to say thank you, and we're not going to give you an annual report because we don't owe you anything. And just to have people actually listen and do that. So that's incredible, but it's also a little bit heartbreaking because if it's happening now, it could have been happening. I mean, we've been saying this is what needs to happen. And it frustrates me to no end that it takes a virus like this devastating, tearing through our population for people to finally realize that this is what needs to happen, mutual aid work needs to happen. But at least I guess at least it's happening. And the way that it's happening specifically with this fund is in a very real way, blowing my mind and then bringing it back together again and helping me find myself. I've been able to do a lot of things. I would see at a VIP level, I would see at an executive leadership level, I would see at a C level that I've never been given the opportunity to do. And I literally created the circumstances for developing my own leadership and executing my own leadership in weeks in a crisis. So in terms of limitations that have been put on me by institutions and on myself, that's also been really educational. They have been blown apart. I really don't know what I'm gonna do after this because I can't go back to being an administrative assistant or, you know, a part-time whatever if I do go back to like part-time work in an office. And I just like, yeah, so that's that's a big question mark. Like, what do you even do after this? But yeah, mostly it's been humbling. It's been beautiful. I've been connecting with a lot of people I didn't even know before. It is a small community, but you know, I honestly like haven't been out very long as trans for like 1,000,001 reasons that, you know, we could go into on a different call. But yeah, I just feel really surprised and really truly blessed and humbled that I could do something like this. Because I don't know if I thought that I could. I think I always told people that I could do something like this, like be in charge of something this big and this impactful. I think I always kind of said it, but I haven't been given the opportunity, and I don't think I truly believed in myself because I haven't been given that opportunity. But now I have, so.
We also have to recognize the degree to which, particularly the last 40 plus years, I think that the most critical success of what you want, I mean, I'll call it the neoliberal project. I don't like that some terms, but I think it's may summarize it in a common way. I think its greatest impact was not just kind of, cannibalizing certain aspects of the state, and making certain functions private. I think its deeper impact is what it did on a cultural and social level, at reprogramming us to a large degree, breaking down the social solidarity that many communities had, particularly in some of the major urban settings. We're talking about it. The institutions, the cultural norms, either good or bad, that existed in, say, a lot of the Black communities that emerged from the South. Like the levels of solidarity that once existed have been pretty much eviscerated, to a large degree. So pulling on certain common traditions and notions to do a level of mobilizing has a diminishing set of returns. And that is something I think we just need to be real about, and that there's a new type of culture that we don't know yet. It's I think, emerging. I think a large part of some of the pushback in the struggle, coming from the movement for Black Lives, challenging patriarchal relations within the Black community that have long been there, whether adopted or something we had brought with us, before the period of enslavement. With some real barriers within our movement, within our communities, and something that was challenged. Within that challenge, I think there's been some voids of people trying to figure out, how do you construct new norms? How do you construct new solidarities? That's going to take us some time, I think, to figure out and construct something new. But I think the reality of the situation is, we have to recognize some of the gains of our opposition in our own social reality. And I know I see it confronted, and it's kind of the how, we've been operating on a theory that we could try to, encourage and push the mutual aid to combine with the solidarity economy work that was already kind of emerging in development somewhat as a movement here in the United States very early, but also try to combine that with some of the more traditional forms of labor organizing, either in the trade unions or the workers' centers, whether, their strengths and weaknesses, combine that and put forward an escalation set of tactics based upon not only us creating kind of new co-ops and things of that nature from the solidarity economy side of things or the mutual aid side, but really starting to encourage and move folks on the more trade union side to start thinking about what the lessons were from like Argentina from 2000, 2001, where there were massive occupations of factories that workers seized and started to re-articulate. We need to start thinking, in my view, on that level. But it does get down to the question of how do we encourage more folks to take more risk. I see us at this phase, honestly, comrades. I think this next couple of months, we are kind of planting seeds. I think for when the next phase hits, which is going to be larger and even more devastating than this one, because of the very strategic and deliberate program of genocide that Trump and his enablers and allies are fully committed to. I mean, he said earlier today that even if there is a second wave, it's not like the first wave stopped already, right? But even if there is a second wave, they're not going to shut anything down. And I think we need to take that and the piece that he did with the EP a couple of days ago, honestly, for what it is. That's a declaration of war against us. And so we have to start thinking, how are we going to step up our creativity and our fight back resistance, and what level of risk are we going to take? These are some honest questions I want to put in addition to those, that Clee, Dean, Maryam have pushed. I think we really need to look at ourselves, look at our comrades, and have these real conversations in our communities without the fear that kind of got engendered as a practice after September 11th. Because that changed some of the political dialogue and relationships that many of us had. We changed our language to try to fight against the censor. I think that's another thing that we need to recognize, so we have a more open set of conversations about what it's going to take to get out of this particular dynamic and situation.
On a level, I think transformative and restorative justice, like we have cultural frameworks for that, and there's a lot of really amazing groups that are working on that, especially in terms of collective care. But on an organizational level and political and movement-based level, I think certain conflicts shouldn't be resolved. I think we should actually precipitate conflict. I like agitation, provocation, and interventions. There's this sort of like false sense of an assumed unity that everybody should flatten out, in organizing. And that's part of the reason that I wrote and published Accomplices Not Allies, is to stimulate the provocation and agitate as much as possible that certain conflicts should not, certain power relationships and the underlying ones that exist and are perpetuated, especially with allyship. I don't want a solidarity with that. So let's actually talk about what we mean by solidarity, whose terms the solidarity is on, and what the conditions are. And at an interpersonal level, again, it's different, but organizationally and politically, I think that that's where we need to be at.